team. Thank you for joining us as we discuss game-changing technologies for fan experience and safety. I'll be the moderator for this panel discussion, and I'm pleased to introduce our panelists, which include Dave Thomas, Managing Director and Vice President for Security and Ballpark Operations at Major League Baseball. Dave is also a board member at the National Infrastructure Advisory Council and is a retired special agent in charge for the U.S. Secret Service. Welcome, Dave. We're also joined by Sareen Nasser, Senior Vice President for Strategic Development at Titan Health and Security Technologies. Sareen came to Titan after several years in leadership for a high-risk private investigations and security company. Welcome, Sareen. Anil Chikara is a co-founder of Evolve Technology. Since founding Evolve Technology in 2013, Anil has been working with a wide range of venues in the US and Europe to keep their environment safe and improve the visitor experience. Welcome, Anil. Then rounding out the panel, we have Charles Marino, the CEO of Sentinel Security Solutions. Prior to founding Sentinel, Chuck held senior security leadership positions with the Golden State Warriors, Oracle, and other organizations. Chuck is a retired supervisory special agent for the U.S. Secret Service. Welcome, Chuck, and thank you all to our panelists today. Before we get started, I want to say that we have everyone muted, so if you have a question, and we hope you have questions, please submit those in the Q&A tab on the right. Now, let's dig in. So Dave Thomas, I want to start with you. What does the stadium of the future look like?
Well, from New York City, good morning, Scott and the rest of the panel and the rest of the folks watching us today, participating today. Thank you for having me. Scott, I appreciate it. I'm excited to kind of share some of our thoughts from stadium perspective. I have the good fortune of overseeing the security and ballpark operations for Major League Baseball, which encompasses essentially all of the operations of the stadium, of our stadiums. Virtually everything to do with everything except for the game of baseball itself. And one of the things that we've been looking at is trying to figure out how to make the process for our fans, or the experience for our fans, more seamless, frictionless, less bumps in the road, really starting from the point of our communication with them when they purchase a ticket. And then going on through the parking process, the transportation process, the parking process, the security screening process, ticketing, getting to your seats, finding food, purchasing food, purchasing other concessions, things like that. And while we have been looking at ways to streamline our processes through technology, COVID hit, and COVID has really only sped up that process. We're all a little more nervous about touching things and interacting in kind of close contact with others that we don't know. So think about the standard walk-through metal detector screening process, where you walk through, you put things on a table, you pass your wallet and phone and keys and things like that around, somebody else touches it, then you're picking it up again. And then if it alarms, you get patted down, someone else that you don't know is touching you. There's all these touch points and close contact with other people in the standard screening and entry process for our venues. And of course, that COVID, what we've learned from COVID, it's had lots of negative impacts, but the positive part of it is that it has increased the speed at which we would like to integrate a number of emerging technologies to make this process faster, easier, fewer choke points, less friction, less contact with others. And so, we think about, mobile ticketing. We think about paying for your parking ahead of time and scanning a QR code at the garage instead of pulling a ticket. As you approach the gates, instead of having long lines where you're standing around for long periods of time with lots of people that you don't know. Technologies like Evolve make that screening and entry process so much faster and less contact. we also would love to, we want to look even further down the road where we're looking at facial recognition opportunities for both ticketing, for concessions. I would love if I could walk up to a concession stand at the ballpark, and through the data that our concessionaires already have on my purchasing patterns, that I walk up and they automatically know who I am, what my payment method is, and what I typically order. And they ask me, would you like your standard order? Would you like your normal, the regular? So a burger, a beer, and fries, and it's automatically paid for, and there's virtually no there's no bumps in the road at all. And so that's kind of in a nutshell where we're looking towards going in the future. We want to continue to provide a very safe and secure environment for our fans, but we want to reduce those friction points all along the process. So we look forward to to what technology can do to to improve our experience for our fans.
Excellent. So, I heard seamless, I heard frictionless, less bumps in the road. If I were to summarize your takeaways more from an industry standpoint, I would categorize those into fan experience, revenue optimization, and then lower operational costs. So if we break the category, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I really forgot to mention, revenue optimization. One thing I do want to mention is that, I have in my nearly 30 years in the law enforcement and security business, we are not revenue generators. We're not thought as revenue generators. And so it's important for us to figure out ways to keep those of us in the security side of things, to keep our fans safe and secure and reduce costs. And so, the old kind of traditional way of security screening or security processes has been stagnant for a long period of time. And so we want to figure out a way where we can kind of boost revenues through our the use of technology. If you have a great experience, if you walk up and have a bad experience at ingress, or you've had a bad experience at parking, you are generally prone to spend less money. Grumpy fans do not want to support your business. And so we want to do what we can in order to make this process of getting into the ballpark much more frictionless and seamless, so that our fans are happier, they have a tendency to spend more money. If my experience of going to a concession stand, for example, takes 5 minutes instead of 20, and I get back to my seat, in time to watch more of the game, then I'm more prone to get up and go back and get dessert or something else. And so, again, this whole idea of every process, outside of watching the game itself, if we make it seamless through the use of technology, then we pretty much can guarantee that we're going to bring in more revenue. So sorry, that was a long response, but it's important to us to to combine those two things.
It is, and I appreciate the elaboration on that. And so if we look at those three components from an industry perspective, Anil, I'll start with you. We have a lot to unpack, but if we'll just limit ourselves to Dave's first point of fan experience, tell us a little bit about Evolve's solution and how it addresses that aspect of the next generation of stadium operations.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. And I appreciate being part of the panel and sharing some of our perspective. I want to key off of something that Dave said. So Dave was talking about the move to touchless or contactless. And, what we hear from people is that although COVID sort of triggered it or accelerated it, it's a trend that's going to happen far past this COVID period of time. We think it's a tailwind that drives a lot of technology adoption, throughout venues and throughout stadiums and throughout arenas. And, what we've been doing for 7 or 8 years is building touchless security screening. So we have this product called Evolve Express. It allows fans to walk right through without ever stopping, without taking things out of their pockets, without having their bags separately checked. So as they're walking through, it's screening them for security threats, for weapons that the venues are concerned about people bringing in. And the way it works is we use a combination of advanced sensors and artificial intelligence technology within this system to do that, and do that very quickly. And again, identify those weapons that are coming through and alert so that they can be resolved with the security staff. And all those personal items people have, phones and keys and coins and everything else, those are recognized and passed right through. One of the things we recognized about the fan experience, and Dave was talking about it when he was talking about the ingress, is traditionally security has, there's existing technology that exists, there's existing processes that exist, but there hasn't been a tremendous amount of innovation in them. And so what we've tried to do is use technology to make it as easy as possible for the visitor and as easy as possible for the guard. So what we've done is we've looked at a lot of those traditional tasks that guards do every day, those mundane tasks. Please take everything out of your pocket. Let me hand wand you and make sure it's not your belt buckle, and use technology to automate that so that the guards and security staff can focus on what's most important, those few people that might have a threat, and how do I resolve that alert? And if there is a threat, I can use whatever protocols are necessary. And if there's not a threat, I let them pass right through. So we're really trying to use this technology to make it easier for the fans, but also easier for the guards, because we think the experience of that whole system is critically important.
And that would be a significantly different experience than I've had over the years, walking through security, taking my kids through security. So that would be a welcome change. Serene, I'll ask you, help us understand what Titan's solution is and how it addresses fan experience.
Yeah, well, good morning from the West Coast. What we do is essentially automate the entire experience. At our core, we're a location-based communication company, from emergency communication, data analytics, revenue generation, just knowing where people are inside the venue. We allow this all to be done seamlessly and invisibly to the fan from within one app, the organization's app. So for example, the MLB app. The main benefit of this really is app adoption. Fans are far more likely to download the venue or league or team app than to be willing to download one app for emergency communication, an app for tickets, an app for discounts. And I can bet you they're never going to download a separate app that just allows you to gather data on them. So by providing the technology and the tools required to integrate into one unified platform, we really are able to enhance just the entire overall fan experience.
I really like the concept of a unified fan app, and I totally agree. When I'm asked to download things, if I think it is just for pure marketing purposes, I just don't even do it. So, Chuck, based on what these two have said about fan experience, how do you recommend chief security officers get buy-in from their leadership for these kinds of initiatives?
Yes, good question. I think it's in part of what Dave said here, kind of laying out the strategy for Major League Baseball that obviously serves as a driving factor in all of this. And hearing from Evolve and Titan, it's now achievable, right? Normally, when you're talking as a CSO of an organization to your leadership, you're highlighting the prevention and the crisis management functionality in terms of brand protection, right? Your security plans and programs are going to prevent the organization from suffering an adverse effect from some negative type of action that's taken place in the long run, and tie that to money, right? Their ability to not take a hit as a brand. And also same thing with business continuity, being able to remain up and running during a crisis, which highlights remaining profitable here. But now you're talking about technologies and implementing them in a way to decrease costs. You're talking about something like Titan, where not only are you able to use them for mass notification during emergencies, but you're also able to use them for commercialization, right? And that is to actually make money, put cash in the hands of the organization. As Dave said, that's not something historically that security has been able to hang its hat on. But the fact now that you're identifying technologies that are going to increase the fan experience for the better, and also do a better job of providing that safety and security than what you have now, and on top of that, drive down costs, and on top of that, commercialize it while it's serving the safety and security functionality, is just outstanding. And it's a game changer, I think, in terms of how these conversations go in the future.
Yeah, and I wonder, going back to you, Chuck, is it easy or hard for chief security officers to make that transition and to talk about cost savings and revenue generation in addition to just security?
Well, just like we're going to have to get educated on new technologies like Evolve and Titan, we're also going to have to get educated on how to speak to our audiences about these things, right? If you want a technology bad enough, then as a CSO, you better learn real quick how to sell it. And so otherwise it's your leadership's not going to believe in it if you come across as not believing in it, or not being able to articulate exactly what it's going to do better on the safety and security side. And also what I would call from security, the added bonus of the commercialization in terms of driving down costs and driving up revenue at places like concessions and apparel shops and things like that based on proximity, which is something that Titan does. So, but it's also how you speak to your audience, who is not always going to be security savvy or technology savvy in this space. So, Dave has brought up, and I think it's good advice, is that you need to speak to your audience in plain English. And you need to explain how things are going to be enhanced, how it's going to provide for the fan experience, the better safety and security, and the commercialization side. But you have to expect that you can't just go through these talking points with your leadership, one after the other, and expect them to say, okay, I got it. Some might. Some have been in the industry for a very long time and have dealt with security. Some have not. Some general managers, some front office staff, it may take longer to educate. So, don't rule out the possibility of having to do demos or offering demos of the technologies you want to implement for your leadership. Have them come to the site, show how you plan on implementing. And really, at the end of the day, just go over and be transparent about what the pros are and what the cons are. You have to be transparent, because if you're not upfront, eventually, if there are any cons to anything, it's going to unveil itself at some point in time during the process. But I mean, this is all a step up here in terms of the technology advantages, just to making sure that everything is safe and becomes more profitable. And plus, you're leaning forward. So if you are at a newer arena, for example, my goal has always been to surround myself with the newer technologies once they've been approved and signed off by the leagues.
Excellent points. Thank you. Anil, going back to you. So if we look at the second topic Dave mentioned of revenue optimization, how does Evolve facilitate that?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Scott. So, we think that revenue starts and ends with the fan and the fan experience. So there's both a direct and indirect way that we think we can help improve revenue optimization. And I'm going to paint two different scenarios. The one scenario is a scenario I've lived with, and I'm sure many of us have lived with over the last couple of years. We're sitting around the dinner table, having dinner with the family. We talk about, what do we want to do? One of the things we want to do is go to a baseball game this summer. So we get online, we buy tickets for a baseball game sort of 2 weekends from now. It's Saturday morning, we get up, we get our jerseys on, we're excited, we get in the car, we drive down to parking, we go to a restaurant, have a nice lunch, a beer, so a lobster roll in the case of Boston, finish that, and then we get out, we start walking to the stadium, and we're walking down the street, the crowds are building, you can sort of feel and hear the buzz. We turn the corner, sort of see the stadium, big stadium there. Everybody's excited, 200 more yards, and then boom, there's a crowd, and that crowd is a line of people trying to get through security. That's the way it's sort of been since the marathon bombing as security has been rolled out. And, that excitement starts to drop pretty quickly. The kids start to get antsy, and then the excitement turns into anxiety. So what happens is, as you're walking with your family through that crowd, kids stay close to me. Let's get in the same line. Let's figure out which line's faster. Then we go through the security process, which is necessary. I fully support what we're trying to do there, but it's the traditional way, right? So I'm taking keys and coins out of my pocket. I'm wondering, did I take everything out? Am I going to beep when I go through? I pass through. My kids then come through. Then my wife comes through. We get our belongings. Want to make sure my son didn't forget his cell phone in the gray bin. And sort of we go into the stadium. Then we get our soda and Cracker Jacks, and we're in. That's sort of the way it's been. What we're trying to do is fundamentally change that. How can we keep that level of excitement all the way through to the point where I sit down, I've got that beautiful field in front of me, and I'm excited for the game. And so the scenario we paint is, I have my lobster roll and my Sam Adams at the restaurant. I'm walking down, we're all excited. You can feel sort of the energy building. We're looking at the stadium. As we're looking at the stadium, we're getting closer. We're looking at the statues and all the history there. Sort of we're passing through, and suddenly we're in the stadium. And in that whole process, we were screened, our bags were screened, our ticket was taken. We never even realized it. It was truly frictionless. So we help with the security part of that. But that, for us, that takes a lot of the anxiety and stress sort of away from that experience in that specific point. What it means is, when I get into the stadium, one, I have more time because there was no waiting in any line. So I have time to go get some food. I have some time to go sort of get a hat. I feel much better about the experience. And then when I go back after that and tell my friends, and my kids are talking to their friends, it's a great fan experience. Dave was mentioning it sort of earlier on. And so if we can help improve that overall fan experience, right? They or we may spend more in the ballpark that day, but even more importantly, we're going to talk about how great it was. And, one of the things we see as we're getting out of this pandemic and reopening is people are trying to figure out what they want to do, right? There's lots of options of where to go and where to spend their money. And I think in the venues we talk to, they're trying to make it as positive an experience as possible to get people sort of out of their house and back into those seats.
I was totally tracking with you, Anil, as you described all the enthusiasm, and then you walk up and you see that line at the entrance, and I have 3 kids, and yeah, same thing. Did you guys get everything out of the box? So Serene, so Titan comes at revenue optimization from a different perspective. Can you help us understand what that is?
Yeah, and actually kind of piggybacking off of what Chuck said, the most straightforward way, I'd say, again, all done through one unified app, is by using the micro location of fans alongside time-based thresholds to deliver tailored discounts just straight to their phones. For example, and this is drawing on personal experience, I'm at an Angels stadium on my way back from the restroom, and I see a concession stand selling Beyond Burgers. I personally get very excited. I want the burger, but the lines were just too long for me. So I walk back to my seat without making any purchases. With our platform, in that instance, I would have met the time threshold and received an automated offer for $1 off coupon. And you better believe I would have stood in that line and bought a burger and fries for me and the people that I'm with. So that is one just very obvious and direct way. On the other hand, through our data analytics, the stadium can determine just which areas have the most foot traffic, which areas tend to have the most static traffic, as well as the times. And they can use this data to increase revenue in all kinds of ways. But one is, for example, by charging more for ad space in the areas that have the most consistent static crowds. So those are 2 very different ways that our venues can, increase revenue.
So really driving or making decisions based on data, and that's a newer component to these operations. Chuck, going back to the CSO's perspective, how should they explain return on investment in speaking to leadership?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Return on investment can be described in a number of ways, which I gave a few examples of. But I think, this is what you were talking about previously about the education of talking about these new technologies. They now really have to start to learn how to talk about ROI in the way that Serene and Anil just described, right? If it's through manpower and the ability to drive that down because you have newer technologies that allow more people to be screened at one time as compared to previously, then be prepared to do that and assign the metrics to it, right? The hourly rates for the guards, the per annum total for all of the guards, and the way that comes down and disappears, and also about the ROI from a company like Titan in terms of where it's able to increase the ad space, where it's able to drive discounts and greater traffic to specific locations in a stadium, in an arena that may not normally get a high volume of foot traffic. And the other thing I would say is don't work in a silo as a CSO, right? I mean, all of these teams have marketing, they have public affairs, they have guest services. Really, you need to work with all of these folks just to have one situational awareness for the security mission, right? It's that see something, say something, where everybody participates in the overall mission of security in a stadium or an arena. But also, you're going to also get ideas from them on how some of the technologies you've brought in, how it can help them do their jobs better, right? So, for example, if I've got a strong mass notification system like Titan, for example, that's also something that my guest services folks can benefit from, right? As these communications are coming into the unified command centers that are set up at each stadium and arena, they're also able to troubleshoot any guest issues, which are also going to be relayed on the mass notification system through a different portal. So, I mean, this is all kind of good for everybody to be aware of and know how to use and know how it's going to help them do their jobs better. And they can help you find ways to even further identify ROI opportunities.
So you're really talking about collaboration as one of the critical aspects of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like I said, don't be afraid to get demos for your front office. Don't be afraid to get demos and have everybody else throughout a stadium and arena sit in. These technologies serve so many multi-purposes now that not only are they going to satisfy what you need on the safety and security, but like I said, other technologies are just going to benefit others. This may be something that guest experience wants to talk about in terms of highlighting, Anil's company and say, listen, this is what we've switched to. Public affairs may want to, talk about this, how this is now next generation security screening. Here's what it means for fans coming to a stadium. It means faster times. It means not having to remove things from your pockets. It means more, less direct impact and more time inside the actual venue. So everybody's going to want to participate in this.
So lower operational costs was the third category that Dave brought up. Serene, help us understand how Titan is going to address that component.
Yeah, of course. This really goes back to just our data analytics. Best data wins is what we like to say, and just having an increased awareness of the flow of traffic, you can focus your resources, whether it's maintenance or security, more heavily on the areas where people tend to congregate, whether it's the bathrooms where they're busier or where more fights tend to occur, just as opposed to having an even number of employees spread throughout the entire stadium at all times, you can just have them strategically placed in the areas that actually need it.
I was writing down your quote of best data wins. That's the most tweetable so far of this session. Let me see. So Anil, the same question to you, lower operational costs. How does Evolve play into that?
Yeah, no, I think the reality is that all of these organizations are coming out of the pandemic. They've hunkered down. They've sort of weathered the economic storm in addition to the pandemic storm. And everybody's focused on getting back and getting it back profitably so they can invest back into their business. And so, there's a couple things that, we can do and we can highlight. We think about sort of it as resources, as sort of human resources, real estate resources and financial resources. But a simple example is a conversation I was having earlier this week with a head of stadium operations and security. And in this case, this gentleman's sort of stadium has 4 gates. 2 of the gates are the primary gates, so tens of thousands of people coming through each of those 2. And then there were 2 secondary gates. And for each of these 2 primary gates, he's got 50 walk-through metal detectors. That's, the way he's been doing it. Each of those walk-through metal detector lanes is typically sort of 2 security staff plus a supervisor overseeing a couple. So he's got about 125 security staff at each of these gates on each of the 50 on the 50 lane setup. That'll process the number of people he needs, 250 to 300, maybe 350 people an hour per lane. Our express system, one express system with 2 lanes will process about 3,600 people an hour. So because people are just walking through, because they don't have to stop, because the bags are getting automatically checked as they go through, because the technology we use can differentiate personal items like belt buckles and cell phones from weapons, it allows many more people to go through much more quickly. And so you can take those 50 lanes and bring them down to 6 or 8 or 10 lanes. And with that, you can bring the guard count down quite a bit. So a system might take 6 or 8 guards, depending on how a customer wants to configure it. So suddenly you're taking 125 guards at sort of gate A down to 40 or 50 guards sort of at gate A. And what that allows people to do is to redeploy those guards. So in some cases, they'll take that security staff and move them to interior parts of the stadium. In some cases, they will take that security staff and take some of them and actually have higher skilled staff or law enforcement and pay for that and put that presence within the stadium itself to provide a higher level of security overall for the venue. Or sometimes they'll take it in the form of savings, just not have as many security staff there. And we hear sort of time and again, particularly for these sort of special event and these game day events, is they have a core security staff, but getting that last 10 or 20 or 30% is hard because people have done different jobs, people are turning over. And so if they have an ability to have a smaller staff, that might be the sort of more regular, more experienced staff that they have game in and game out. So an ability to sort of reallocate resources on the human capital side. And then as you take sort of a bank of 50 down to a bank of 6 or 8 of the Evolve systems, you're going to save a lot of physical footprint. You're going to save a lot of space. So whether it's a inner city stadium that has tight space, or even a stadium that's out in the suburbs, space is at a premium. And so it's the ability to take that space and reallocate it to the fan experience, to activating sponsors, to kiosks and other retail operations, food and beverage. That's a way that you can sort of think about reallocating resources as well. So we think there's a real opportunity, particularly at the big gates, at the main gates, to reallocate both human capital and some of the sort of the real estate resources that are used for screening.
Yeah, and those were some significant numbers, Anil. 125 security staff down to 40, 50 walkthrough detectors down to 6. Dave, we've discussed technologies obviously this morning about that affect screening and communications use cases, but from your perspective, rolling out these and other systems, how has the implementation of one technology had a ripple effect on other processes? And I asked that because earlier we were talking before the call, and we talked about mobile ticketing and the challenges that has afforded you.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, have a whole page of notes that I've been taking during this conversation. I won't go into everything now, but to answer your question, it's important to it's important to understand or to look forward to how the implementation of any single given technology will impact other operational components to running your stadium or your arena. One of those things that we found as we're making adjustments to ease the ingress or the security screening process is that the impact that it then has is on your ticketing, your ticket takers. So generally we because when you scan a ticket, that ticket is no longer valid once it's been scanned for entry. So that someone who comes with the same barcode or the same QR code in a screenshot can't then get into your ballpark. So you go through security screening first, then you get to ticketing. And if you're secure, the way things have been is that things were kind of, there was an equilibrium between the security screening process and the ticket taking process, or the ticket scanning process. If you speed up one, then you're going to impact the other. And so, so it's important to figure out, how you can, if you're going to speed up your security screening process, you need to figure out how you're going to speed up your ticket scanning process. So, and then, integrating those technologies. So whether it's facial recognition or some other biometrics for scanning tickets, it needs to keep a pace with the speed at which the technology such as Evolve can conduct the screening process. And so one of the things that we've already found is that during COVID, we're trying to eliminate paper ticketing so that somebody's not fumbling through their hands and pulling a piece of paper out of their pocket. But even when you integrate mobile ticketing on your phone, my phone is, I go through the screening process, my phone's in my pocket or whatever, it's locked. I now have to open it, unlock it, which oftentimes is going to require me, if I'm still wearing a mask, to pull my face mask down, and then find the app or the QR or barcode on my phone and then scan it. That actually can take longer than pulling a piece of paper out of your pocket. And so it's just very important as we kind of implement some of these technologies that we look at all of the processes, operational processes, and look for ways to improve those at the same time and integrate the technology, at the same time.
Yeah, it is certainly important to look at the unintended consequences as best you can as you implement these. So, Chuck, to build on that, I know that you're working with just about all the other sports leagues. What are you finding are the barriers to implementing these technologies?
Well, some of it has to do with what Dave just described, right? You've got security technologies that just, they can't work in isolation. Every action is going to have a reaction. So you need to make sure that from a technology chain, that everything is able to keep up if you're increasing things like time and speed and volume of people that are going from being screened to scanning tickets. So, you got to make sure that all plays out. It's extremely important. So, Dave hit on a great point there. The barriers are listen, some people just aren't ready for the next generation. So you've got to keep at it. But I mean, I think if you speak, to the point in terms of, and be transparent in terms of what these newer technologies can do and what they're going to represent and how they're going to serve the fans, which are the main driver of revenue that's used to pay everybody in the organization, then I think you're gonna get some buy-in. But as a CSO, you've just got to remember that this is not always going to be a one-day conversation and then the piece of paper gets signed off on. Sometimes this is an ongoing dialogue. Sometimes it's in response to a situation that occurs where you're being asked about newer technologies that might be available out there. So this should always be an ongoing dialogue with those that are not technically assigned to the security space, because usually you're going to find one, there is a keen interest. You have no product without the overall safety and security of the fans. Dave can tell you that. I mean, if people don't feel safe and secure, they're just not going to come. And that's not a situation that anyone wants to be in. You can't always hang your hat on that. That's probably the most extreme example when you're talking to a front office, but it's the truth. And so what you want to do is always have the best programs, the best policies, the best technologies, the best manpower, et cetera, in place to make sure that people are getting in and out safely.
If Chuck said that some people just aren't ready for these kinds of technologies, what do you see as the impact to stadium owners, to those stadium owners that, what is the impact of not adopting some of these solutions?
Sure, that's it's a matter of being able to effectively articulate the risk versus the reward. And so there is, we in the security business like to describe how we reduce risk. Can't eliminate it, but being able to articulate the processes you currently have in place, what the risks are to continuing to use the same old systems and processes as the rest of the world kind of speeds past you. Articulate those risks to your those who hold the purse strings, and articulate the rewards to them in plain language that they understand. We, particularly those of us who come from law enforcement backgrounds, have a tendency to speak a different language. We speak our own unique language, and we need to get out of that that habit and be able to effectively articulate risks and rewards to those who hold the purse strings, and demonstrate to them the benefits of moving in a particular direction, a strategic direction that's going to be beneficial both to the fans, to the guest experience, but also to the organization that you serve, because you want to make it a better organization.
Absolutely. Anil, I have heard talk of a digital threshold. Can you tell us what that is and how Evolve contributes to it?
Sure. So, if I think back of the last sort of 12 to 15 months and what we've seen different organizations do is a lot of them have used the time to sort of rethink parts of their operation, their technology, their approaches. We spent a lot of this hour talking about that. And one of the themes we've seen loud and clear is continuing to digitize their operation. We talked a lot about contactless payments and whatnot, and we think about the threshold as an area that is ready to be digitized. And the first and most important thing we're doing is doing screening, security screening, to get people in efficiently. And we've talked quite a bit about that. But there's other things we can do with that position that we have, that important position at the entrance to the venue. So today we do screening and we have analytics around the visitors that come through. Serene talked a lot about the analytics that they have as well. We see the desire of these organizations to have data and use them in different ways is critically important. But we also see it as an ability to provide other technologies or other capabilities. So when the pandemic hit, a number of customers were asking us about elevated body temperature, the thermal IR checks. And so we evaluated a number of the thermal IR cameras. We chose one that we thought performed well, and then we attached it to the Express system and we provided to it to the market. And so there's a handful of customers that have combined security screening with thermal IR screening for elevated body temperature. But that's just one example. We see additional areas where we can provide more digital capabilities there. We've talked about ticketing. That's something that we're looking at as well. Can we use that threshold to verify tickets and there's a lot of companies out there that are making good headway there. So can we sort of partner with them and incorporate their digital capabilities into this as well? I think as I listen to Serene, and we have not talked about this before, there's a really interesting use case that can come out. So let's go back to that venue with 4 gates, 2 big gates. Let's say that the Evolve Express system is integrated to the Titan emergency notification system. And let's say an hour before the game at gate A, somebody comes through, they're detected in our Express system to have a threat. The process and security staff identifies that there is an actual threat. There's a handgun or a weapon on that person. That's concerning, and they resolve it. Then 15 minutes later at gate B, somebody else comes through. They have a weapon. It's a weapon of concern. The nature of that person causes the security team to be concerned. There's 2 different ways this can play out. If there's an integration with the emergency notification at Titan, maybe when that first person comes through gate A, people get notified. The second person comes through at gate B, people get notified broadly around the stadium, and there's an increased level of concern, and perhaps the threat level goes up. So then suddenly at gates C and D, the whole security team and the supervisor are now on alert, right? There's something going on at the stadium. It gives a much broader level of situational awareness. It incorporates the people that are on the front lines in the entire stadium. That's a different scenario than without that integration, where hopefully the security supervisor at gate A, radios in, and then gate B radios in. They may or may not do it. They may be consumed with some other activity. So they might just be trying to deal with something there. And that scenario where there were a weapon at each gate comes out in a hot wash at the end of the load in. So that game day awareness was not necessarily sort of there. So I think the ability to not just put more in our Evolve Express threshold, but start to integrate these technologies across the stadium that are doing different things and together can provide a much better level of situational awareness and capability is really the way we need to think about this as we look forward.
I couldn't agree more, Anil. The ability for manufacturers to come together with an integrator and increase the capabilities of each of their subcomponents is really critical to the success of these projects. I want to be sensitive to the time and give the audience a chance to ask any questions, so please do so. Submit those in the Q&A tab. There is a 15 or 20-second delay from when we talk until the audience hears it. So to fill that time, I'm going to open it up back to the panelists. And after hearing what the other panelists have said, are there any final thoughts, any new ideas that they wanted to express before we wrap this up?
I'm actually, I wanted to kind of bring up a point. We've talked a little bit about data analytics, and it's, a lot of folks in the security business don't seem to really care much about analytics. But the one thing that I can tell you that is important to me is figuring out how we fail, right? Where are our fail points? And while I also believe that our employees are our number one resource, right? We absolutely need them. They're absolutely critical to our operations. I think what you will see in the statistical data of quality assurance or red team testing is that the weapons that get into venues got in because of a human failure, not because the technology was ineffective or did not work. And so some of the things that we really want to improve upon, the things that, that technology such as Evolve can help us solve is the level of exertion of our screening staff. And so when you have a secondary screening process at which your staff person has to squat and stand repeatedly, out in the heat, that person gets very tired and is prone to miss things. And so it's important to, again, like I mentioned earlier, to articulate the risk. And if technology, the use of technology in these scenarios can essentially make our personnel more effective in doing their jobs, then we're reducing the risk of allowing security incidents to happen. Anyway, just wanted to bring up that point, Scott. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Any other final thoughts? Go ahead, Serene.
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback off of what Dave said in terms of failure. And this would be failure that's outside of your control, but what do you do when the networks go down? What we found is that a lot of sites don't really have a good backup plan. So whether it's something like a natural disaster that has completely wiped out your cell towers, or there's just a ton of phones in the stadium, and on top of that adds something like an active shooter incident that overloads the networks, how are you going to communicate what to do to everybody, fans, staff, when you can't even send a text message? So something that we've done to help overcome that is our mesh networking. So independent of any networks, you can still communicate instructions and updates out to both staff and fans, even when there's zero network connectivity. So I think that's a point of failure that we don't think about until we're actually in it, and there's nothing you can really do.
Agreed. It's absolutely too late at that point.
Hey, Scott, I'll just add how you can tie all these new technology opportunities to the professional growth of your security staffs and other staffs in organizations. I mean, in terms of keeping a workforce motivated, tie technology to their professional growth in the industry. And I think you'll see a new sense of motivation at times if they're being trained on and utilizing on a daily basis the latest and greatest in technology solutions that are making their jobs easier, in some cases more efficient. And they're going to be talking to their friends about it, and before you know it, it serves as a source of motivation. So really another reason not to be fearful, for organizations not to be fearful of implementing new technologies into their environment.
Excellent. Thank you, Chuck.
Scott, can I just highlight something, if you don't mind? So if I think about the customers that have been most successful, when we look at sort of what are those characteristics, there's 3 characteristics we've seen. One characteristic is they know exactly what the technology will and won't do. That's our technology, that's any other technology. Dave was talking about piloting the technology. I think it's important for us as providers of technology, and it's important for the users and executives that are going to deploy it to really understand what it does and what it doesn't do. I think it's really critically important. And, we encourage people to talk to other customers that are using it, right? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? Where do you want it to go? I think that's one really critically important thing. The second is it's only technology. And Dave was saying this. So the most critical and successful deployments include the people, the security staff, and the process they use, right? The old technology, people, and process. And thinking about that as one system together, and how do they optimize the system? Because if you don't have people that are trained and they know the protocols they're going to follow, like it starts to break down, and people are at the heart of it. The security staff is at the heart of running these things. They don't run themselves. So that's the second point. And the third we've seen is in our discussions with customers before they decide and before they deploy, it's not just the security team. It's the security team plus the guest services team plus the facility operations and game day operations people, and they have a collective understanding of what they want to do, and all of their input is into the overall solution. And again, as we think about what the most successful customers we've seen are, it tends to have those sort of 3 pieces that drive a lot of their success.
Thank you, Anil. Well, with that, I'd like to wrap up this panel. Again, I'd like to thank Dave, Anil, Serene, and Chuck for their time and sharing their experiences with us. If you'd like more information, please reach out to me. My email is scott.frigaard, Frigaard, @convergint.com. So thank you all and have a great day.